Welcome to Anews. I'm amidst and you're watching Turkey's Diplomacy. Turkey is stepping back into the center of Ukraine diplomacy as President Erdoğan and President Zelenskyy renew support for reviving the Istanbul peace process, highlighting Ankara's role as a key mediator. Europe is also recalibrating its approach, with Ursula von der Leyen proposing a major new funding model for Ukraine, while reports surface of a secret 28-point U.S. Russia peace plan taking shape behind the scenes. In the Middle East, tensions are rising once again after Israeli strikes on Wednesday killed at least 28 Palestinians, with Hamas warning the United States to control Israeli ceasefire violations.
Bugünkü görüşmelerimizde de İstanbul sürecinin pragmatik ve sonuç odaklı bir anlayışla sürdürülmesi gereği üzerinde durduk. İstanbul sürecinin daha kapsamlı bir içerikle artık akut hal alan sorunları giderecek şekilde yeniden devreye girmesinin faydalı olacağı kanaatindeyiz. Bölgede akan kanın durmasını arzu eden tüm ortaklarımızdan da İstanbul sürecine yönelik yapıcı yaklaşım sergilemelerini bekliyoruz. Ancak evvela ateşkesi hızlandıracak, adil ve kalıcı barışın önünü açacak önerileri Türkiye olarak Rusya ile de ele alma konusunda her daim hazırız. Bu bağlamda müttefikimiz Amerika'nın da sürece dahilini önemsiyoruz.
Ми говорили предметно і по ситуації в дипломатії, і зараз багато процесів активізувалися. Ми стараємось зробити так, щоб вся активність була спрямована саме на мир, на достойний мир, гарантовану безпеку. Війна має закінчитись, немає альтернативи миру. Росія повинна усвідомлювати, що за війну, за вбивства не має бути жодної винагороди. Сподіваємось, до кінця року ми відновити обміни, повернути значну кількість полонених. Туреччина нам в цьому дуже допомагає. Хочу вам особисто за це подякувати, пане президенте.
Welcome back. Daily Sabah's editorial coordinator, Dr. Mehmet Çelik. Welcome to the program. Dr. Mehmet, in a very interesting meeting yesterday in Ankara between Erdoğan and Zelenskyy, there were many things that were discussed. Obviously, the revival of the peace talks, prisoners of war, and also trade as well. There was trade as well. Turkey and Ukraine have agreed to multiple different things when it comes to trade. Now, Mehmet, I want to ask you, Erdoğan said that a comprehensive framework is needed, and there are many acute challenges that need to be resolved. Let's start with that. What are some of the challenges that are blocking peace talks right now?
Well, I mean, there's more than just a couple, especially given the fact that since 2022, the war has been, not really fluctuating with one side winning over the other at times. But I think that the time is ripe for a diplomatic solution, because there is no winner in this war so far, despite the fact that Russia has captured and has been invading some of the Ukrainian territory. I think Mr. Erdoğan, during his press conference with Mr. Zelenskyy yesterday, gave several messages that I thought were important. One was to the European allies of Ukraine, saying that, look, in the previous talks, the ceasefire was very close, but we know that, as it was reported in the media, that UK blocked one of the attempts, actually. As you know, there was a time when the two sides were very close to achieving a tangible result with regards to ceasefire. But there has been 3 other talks so far in Istanbul, and those talks have produced actual tangible results. Prisoners exchange, some talking points were produced with regards to ceasefire. So there is that dialogue that Istanbul talks actually produced on how to achieve ceasefire. But still, when the sides are in a non-compromising position, it becomes very hard to continue that momentum that is achieved by the talks through diplomatic channels. We know that the United States is also conducting some talks with the Russian counterparts. As far as they have been reported in the U.S. media, there is talks of a plan similar to Gaza by Donald Trump to be imposed or applied on the Ukraine conflict as well. So the message, another message was given to the United States that their participation in this negotiation or in this attempt to establish a ceasefire is also important. This is how it is seen from Ankara. Another one is also given to Russia when they said we want these talks to be continuing and we want the Russian side to be approaching with the same motivation to establish a solution through, I think, diplomatic channels. This is another message given to Russia, which Ankara is the only partner basically able to talk to both sides from an equal perspective. So these messages were important. You touched upon other bilateral cooperations. Turkey and Ukraine, they're trying to, or they will, they've announced that joint production of some of the defense industry mechanisms, but also they want to increase their trade volume to $10 billion. And Mr. Erdoğan actually highlighted, despite the fact that there's a conflict, still Turkish investments are continuing in Ukrainian territory, and the businessmen are still there, continuing that. When it comes to, what are the challenges? I think there are several challenges. One is that there is a big, as I've always said in this show, there's, I think, a discrepancy between the European position with regards to this conflict and the U.S. approach to how to solve this conflict, or how to bring a solution through diplomatic channels. Europeans, they want to have more a security-oriented approach vis-a-vis the Russian threat, but for Donald Trump and the U.S. administration, this conflict is actually a burden at the moment. It is costly, but it also makes the U.S. decision makers shift away their focus from the actual bigger point on their agenda, and that is the Asia Pacific. This is why Donald Trump wants to end the war in Gaza. This is why he wants to end the war in Ukraine, even if it is just on paper. Of course, the plans that he proposes are different than their actual application on the ground, and whether or not they actually materialize and achieve some concrete results with regards to a peace or with regards to a ceasefire or a solution to the actual problem. Now, I think one of the main obstacles is also that achieving a solution doesn't mean that you're achieving actually a just peace. Because if it is going to mean that Russia will be remaining as the invader on the Ukrainian territory, then you can establish or you can stop the fight, but this doesn't mean that this is a just peace. On the other hand, if the Ukrainian side are not in that compromising position, or if they don't change that as part of a solution, then the fight will continue, and the fight will need to be funded. The fight is also creating security tensions, economic tensions, energy-related tensions for the European countries. So there's a lot of, I think, different tensions that are built up with regards to how to solve this solution. This is why Mr. Erdoğan believes that, or Turkey's position as a mediator in this conflict, that the solution itself needs to be a comprehensive one. Achieving a ceasefire is not a permanent solution. Achieving a ceasefire through compromises from Ukraine and letting Russia take over the territory is not a permanent solution. I think the solution, or one of the bigger problems is also that if Russia is allowed to take Russia, Ukrainian territory, despite international law, international agreements and conventions, then this could also pave the way or encourage other states that have a similar motivation to take over other countries' territories. And I think in a way that will open the Pandora's box if Russia is allowed to take over the Ukrainian territory just because they invaded. I mean, there could be alternative solution to find a middle ground, maybe leaving those areas as an autonomous region, or perhaps having some sort of peacekeeping force there, or other alternatives could be found. But I think to find a quick solution to this a very deeply rooted problem between the two countries will be, I think, paving way for more problems to emerge in the aftermath. Because a sustainable peace is not necessarily just a ceasefire or just stopping the war. You can stop the war, but it doesn't mean that you're achieving a sustainable peace. What is required in this conflict is not just a ceasefire. Of course, the killings, the attacks on especially infrastructure and the civilians must be stopped, as in every conflict. But for the solution to be a permanent one, a just one, a sustainable peace is what's needed.
Mehmet, I want to ask you something this has been on my mind for a very long time. When it comes to Gaza, Turkey has been a facilitator, Turkey has been a mediator. Even when you look at the war in Ukraine, Turkey has been hosting conferences, hosting peace talks. But at the end of the day, the United States comes and takes all the credit. Isn't this unfair to Turkey?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure if I agree with the fact that the United States comes and takes all the credit. I think everyone knows Turkey's prestige when it comes to mediation. Everyone knows Turkey's positive contribution to different, to finding a solution or peace in different parts of the world, in several other conflicts, be it in Horn of Africa between Ethiopia or Somalia, be it between Azerbaijan and Armenia, be it in Ukraine, in different parts of the even Turkey wanted to become part of the solution, or that's to de-escalate the tensions between India and Pakistan. So, and Qatar, for example, is a mediator as well in this Gaza conflict. Was a mediator. Egypt is part of that. So there's different actors involved. But as the superpower, Donald Trump being the celebrity leader of the superpower, of course, attracts more attention. But everyone acknowledges Turkey's role, and everyone appreciates Turkey's role. And I think credit is given where it is due with regards to Mr. Erdoğan's leadership, very influential, as a very influential actor and a mediator in these conflicts. I mean, if it wasn't because of Mr. Erdoğan's ability to speak with Mr. Putin and Mr. Zelenskyy at the same time, a grain deal perhaps wouldn't have been achieved. That is something very important for the global food security, for example. If it wasn't because of Mr. Erdoğan's leadership and his aim to bring a solution to this conflict, prisoners exchange wouldn't have happened. Talks in Istanbul wouldn't have happened. I mean, there's even between Afghanistan and Pakistan, Turkey is a mediator now, and that process is continuing. And
Azerbaijan and Armenia, Mehmet, I want to ask you about that as well. Trump took all the credit. He's like, I arranged this peace agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia.
As I said, when you are a superpower and you have a celebrity president, he wants all the flashes to be popping for him, and he plays for the optics. He wants the optics to be all just focusing on him. But I think in the realpolitik, everyone acknowledges Turkey's role, Turkey's initiatives, Turkey's influence over different parties when it comes to finding a solution, when it comes to mediating. And Mr. Trump himself highlights this role very, very frequently as well.
Mehmet, also, there are two things now I want to talk. First, it's about Europe, and then the second, the secret peace plan that is being devised by the United States and Russia. But let's start with Europe, Mehmet. Now, von der Leyen has proposed 3 options to fund Ukraine for the next 2 years, and 135 billion euros. That's what they're going to provide to Ukraine. EU members will contribute directly. There's going to be joint EU borrowing, and they're going to use frozen Russian central bank assets as well. Mehmet, how badly is Europe being impacted by this war?
Well, let's just put it this way. From the beginning of the war, European position is very vulnerable with regards to this conflict. Very simply, their economy is affected by that. Very simply, the energy routes are affected by that. Their budget is hugely allocated to defense spending. So there's a lot of burden on Europe. But to deter that Russian threat, they need to be on alert, basically, from their perspective. I'm saying this. They're saying that we need to be alert, so we need to increase. We need to reestablish a secure Europe, a Europe that will have a deterrence force. Right now, none of the European countries actually have that internationally. I mean, European Union or other European countries are not part of that multipolar world. When we talk about Russia, when we talk about China, the United States, these are the actors on the table. Europe, unfortunately, is not able to find that seat on that table when the big decisions are being made over several conflicts around the world or over international matters that affect even European countries. When that is the case, Trump is able to call them and line them across from his seat and speak to them, and I would say, in a almost humiliating posture. So when that is the case, this war, of course, the European wants to end it, but they do not want to end it in a similar fashion that Donald Trump wants to end it. Donald Trump wants to call it an end, say this is, the war is ended, and that's it, because he's already secured a mineral deal with Ukraine. Whether some of that territory is given to Russia is not much of a big concern for him. He wants to be done with Ukraine and move to the next region, which is Asia Pacific for him. But for the Europeans, that problem is still there. That burden is still there. That threat, as they perceive it, is still there. The Russian threat is not, or as they put it, is not diminishing when a solution is found for Ukraine. For them, they ask the questions: where will be the next place for Russia? But I think Europeans and that, I think that the relationship between Europe and United States is also not where the Europeans want it to be, as an equal or as a backer when it comes to security or defense-related issues. The United States reliability is not 100% there. So the Europeans, they want to reestablish themselves and reestablish that security architectures that will, in a way, minimize their dependence on the United States. But for that, whether it is achievable is one thing, but the cost is huge. It is not something that can happen from today till tomorrow, or in the near future, unless there is an aggressive spending by European countries, and that will put, of course, a big dent on their economies, on their day-to-day lifestyles. So the Europeans are not used to securitization in that sense and defense spending.
So, Mehmet, like you just said, that Trump wants to end the war in Ukraine once and for all. Is that the reason why now this plan is being devised with the Russians? There's a secret plan which has 28 points, and it's based on the Gaza framework as well. And Russia and the United States are negotiating. Don't you think it's similar to the Gaza plan, because Ukraine is being sidelined here just like the Palestinians were?
Well, I think so. I mean, as I said, the plan is being talked, and in U.S. media has reported that, but how tangible its points will be, how concrete results will be achieved, whether the concrete results will be achieved or not is another thing. But when we're looking at Trump's fashion and his style so far, we see that he just calls it and he expects it to be done. He says the peace is achieved, the war is now over, and he expects it to be done. But the reality on the ground does not show us that actual plan is being implemented or has the ability to achieve concrete results, as has been the case with the Gaza plan in the second phase. The first phase was a lot easier to end the ceasefire, allowed prisoner exchange, and opened the humanitarian corridor. But even then, the ceasefire is being violated. Prisoner exchange is not completed 100%, and the humanitarian corridor is restricted to a certain degree. I mean, in the second phase, there's even bigger issues in terms of achieving them, and for asking Hamas to lay down arms, asking them to leave all the control and the governance to a body that has nothing to do with the Palestinians agency, and the decision makers in Palestine are not included. What will happen to a two-state solution? What will happen to the occupation of other territories? I think the problem here is that there is a big disconnect between what Donald Trump wants to do and what the realities on the ground actually show.
Dr. Mehmet, thank you for that analysis. I'll be right back with you. At least 28 Palestinians have been killed in a wave of Israeli attacks on the Gaza Strip, marking one of the most significant breaches of the U.S. brokered ceasefire that took effect last month.
At least 28 Palestinians were killed in 4 Israeli airstrikes on Wednesday in a part of Gaza under Hamas control since a shaky ceasefire took effect in October. The Israeli military said its forces struck Hamas targets across Gaza after its members fired on its troops in violation of the nearly 6-week-old ceasefire. No Israeli forces were injured. Hamas condemned the Israeli strikes as a dangerous escalation and urged the United States to honor its stated commitments and exert immediate pressure on Israel to enforce the ceasefire and halt its attacks. But a U.S. official, who spoke anonymously, said Hamas was aiming to break the ceasefire and not fulfill its commitment to demilitarize.
قوات الاحتلال الإسرائيلي تقوم بعمليات الاستهداف والتصعيد بشكل واضح في قطاع غزة. تم استهداف أكثر من مكان في القطاع تحديدا مدينة غزة. كان آخر استهداف مبنى الأوقاف موجود في حي الزيتون في مفترق عسقولة بشكل مباشر بطائرة حربية بصاروخين. هناك 3 من الشهداء وأكثر من 25 إصابة وصلت إلى مستشفى الأهلي العربي منهم أطفال ونساء وكبار.
Medics said 10 people were killed in the Gaza City suburb of Zaytown, 2 in the Shahaya suburb to the east, and the rest in 2 separate attacks in Khan Yunis in the southern Gaza Strip. Repeated shooting incidents have pointed to the fragility of the ceasefire. Israel and Hamas have traded blame for what both call violations of the U.S. brokered truce, the first stage of President Donald Trump's 20-point plan for a post-war Gaza. All 4 attacks were far beyond an agreed-upon imaginary yellow line separating the areas under Israeli and Palestinian control. The Zaytown attack was on a building belonging to Muslim religious authorities, and the Khan Yunis attack was on a UN-run club, both of which housed displaced families. The October 10 ceasefire in the 2-year Gaza war has eased the conflict, enabling hundreds of thousands of Palestinians to return to Gaza's ruins. Israel has pulled troops back from city positions, and aid flows have increased. But violence has not completely halted. Palestinian health authorities say Israeli forces have killed 305 people in strikes on Gaza since the truce, nearly half of them in one day last week when Israel retaliated for an attack on its troops.
Welcome back to the program. Joining us now from the French capital is Mideast political analyst Dr. Abdunnoor Toumi. Dr. Toumi, welcome to the program.
Good morning to you and to Dr. Mehmet and your viewers.
Dr. Toumi, yesterday Israel attacked Gaza again. Another ceasefire violation. 28 people have been killed. Multiple people have been injured as well. For how long will Israel keep violating this ceasefire?
This is a good question, and it's a 1 million question, because Israel never ceased fire in Gaza, and not only in Gaza, but in South Lebanon and in South Syria now. And again, and this is that dilemma of this equation in terms of war and peace. But according to the Israelis, I mean, does it work? I mean, their equation is very simple. It's neither peace nor peace, only wars, whether you like it or no. Now, this is, again, is challenging, like, frontally the international community, and notably the latest 2803 UN Security Council resolution, in which it's supposed to be like a serious and legal ceasefire and moving forward for President Donald Trump's quote-unquote peace plan. And which is, I mean, the Palestinian resistance did compare to these the Sharm el-Sheikh resolutions and did honored the first stage of this plan, but now just waiting to move on for the next stage or phase 2, in which the Israelis, they don't want to hear about it. Because, again, just this morning, I mean, we were in a news report, and there are, I mean, they continue to bomb Gaza, and it has been more than 300, I believe, 90 times violating this plan. And this is, again, and we saw that, again, I think I told you that in previous shows, the Israelis continue in their approach dealing with this deterrence doctrine vis-à-vis its enemies, whether in Palestine, in Lebanon, and now in Syria, for continuing to go and bomb. And as a result of, there is no accountability and impunity.
Dr. Toubi, also, it's not just the occupied Gaza Strip, right? It's other countries as well. Lebanon was attacked, a refugee camp was targeted, 13 people were killed over there. So how can we stop these attacks? How can the international community stop Israel's expansion, its occupation, its killings in other countries? What's the solution for that?
And you said it. I mean, again, they just 2 days ago bombarded southern Lebanon and a refugee camp in Ain al-Hilwa in Lebanon. And actually, they were, I mean, according to the Israelis' narrative, that they target Hamas leader. But I think what we saw on the news, they just bombed the soccer field where the children were, you know, like exchanging ball kicks. So, but the main question, I mean, we have been asking this question for, like, during the last 2 years of the ongoing genocide, but for decades. I mean, who's going to stop Israel and how? And again, the only way is by those hypocrites, Western leaders, and even some leaders in the region have to show their guts and can impose serious sanctions and challenging the Israeli leaders and telling them enough is enough, and this carnage and this provocation attitude has to stop. But it's unfortunately, it's not just a provocation. It's de facto a mode and the doctrine of Israelis military now wanting, like, going back to the pre-October 7, according to their deterrence doctrine vis-à-vis the Palestinians and its neighbors and the region. But again, we're talking about Gaza, and it's the same thing is happening in occupied West Bank. And this is, again, brings us to look carefully to these 2803 UN Security Council resolution that's speaking about imposing an international force and by, again, dividing Gaza totally from the West Bank. And it's not about a historical matter, it's now a geographical matter, and in which will lead to, again, forget about the Palestinian state and another sense of a neo-colonialism approach imposed by Westerners to the Easterners.
Dr. Toomey, you were talking about the Security Council. So on Monday, Trump's Gaza plan was endorsed by the Security Council, but Hamas has rejected it. What are your views on that?
I think it is understandable by from the Palestinian resistance and even from all the Palestinians. I mean, we exclude only the Palestinian Authority, in which, I mean, even the Palestinian Authority, and we saw the latest declaration of the Israeli, I don't know who is, National Security Minister, Ben-Gvir, who challenged directly the Israeli Prime Minister. I mean, if he speaks about the Palestinian state, I mean, he will, ask him to arrest Mahmoud Abbas and kill all the Palestinian Authority members. I mean, how one can, talk about this and how one can hope for peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis. And this is why, the Palestinian resistance and notably Hamas is, their concern, it's legitimate because it is making an end to, first of all, Palestinian resistance. And by going on this, the aim of this is to go and disarm the Palestinian resistance in Gaza and make Gaza free armed. But this is the question that now has to be asked from the other side. I mean, the Arab leaders and the Muslim leaders who did play a major role in the Sharm el-Sheikh deal with President Donald Trump, and to challenge him and asking, again, legitimate questions about the purpose and the main and the objectives of this plan, because it looks like, it was this, first of all, the President Donald Trump's plan was emptied from its substance, and the UN Security Council 2803, it is unfair to the Palestinian resistance and to the Palestinian people, and again, ultimately for the Palestinian self-determination and establishing statehood, because there is just a line was mentioned in this resolution about, I'm just paraphrasing, moving toward a Palestinian state. So, before in Oslo and in Annapolis, decades ago, we were talking about the possibility of this two-state solution. Now we are putting aside these two-state solutions and talking about the possibility for going or moving toward a Palestinian state. Frankly, I'm not an international law expert, but it doesn't make any sense for resistance people and for people who are fighting for their land and for their freedom, and also after all, the Palestinian cause is not just an ideological or romantic cause, but it is a national liberation war against an illegal occupation that have been taking place for 7 decades.
Mehmet, I want to ask about your views on the current situation. And I'm sure you must agree with Dr. Abdunnoor Toomey when he said that there was never a ceasefire in the first place. Israel has continued attacking Palestinians in the occupied Gaza Strip. How are you looking at this recent escalation of attacks?
Well, history did not unfortunately encourage us to be hopeful about this ceasefire, given Israel's record of breaking the ceasefires, bombing the negotiation table in Doha, and not just doing what it sees to be right when it is also disregarding international law, international human rights law, international conventions, etc. And this, we were saying that will be the case. This killing is not stopping. The speed of killing is only actually decreasing. Rather than carpet bombing and just doing everything possible to destroy Gaza. Now they are still doing killing, but just not at the same speed. It is, that ceasefire is on paper. As we said, the Trump plan itself is big on headlines, but when it comes to the actual applicability and whether or not it will produce some tangible results, not only as a solution to this conflict or to this genocide, but as a just solution that will be accepted by both sides. And I of course, I agree that ceasefire is not holding very in a way that it should be. But I also understand Palestinians' concerns with regards to this plan, with regards to the ISF, International Stabilization Force, the Board of Peace, as they call it. All these are not only not producing solutions to the problem or not producing any answers to what will happen to Palestinians' future, it is also reinforcing the Israeli security, Israeli position, Israeli approach to this solution. With, when they talk about different zones, for example, one is a safe zone where Israel will be, one is a red zone when there's destruction. I mean, where will the Gazans go then? Where is it left for them to be able to live? And will they eventually really withdraw all the Palestinians' land and Israelis will go back to where they came from in their territory or in the other parts of occupied territories? If we, look at the fact that 1967 borders are basically violated at all points. So there's that skepticism from the Palestinians, which I think is very right, because the vagueness and the fact that there is many blank points with regards to a future for Palestinians, not only in Gaza, but in the other parts of the occupied territories, make them very skeptical and make them saying that, look, for us to be able to trust this process, it should say something about us and what will this mean for us, not just the Israeli side. So I agree with Dr. Toomey that, of course, the ceasefire has been violated many times, not just the bloody killing yesterday, but prior to that too, the humanitarian corridor is restricted. There are still killings with one excuse or another by Israeli forces. So, I mean, unless what is being envisioned on paper has real reflection on the ground, I'm afraid it is not going to be a sustainable one. But the fact that there is more countries now involved, the fact that there is an international public opinion that is also putting pressure on different governments, be it in Europe or elsewhere, I think it's changing the course. Despite the ceasefire not being applied as it should be, despite restrictions and despite some of the shortcomings, I think the involvement of many different Muslim countries, the involvement of international actors from the region and elsewhere, the fact that public opinion internationally has been changed, increases the chances that this will put more pressure on Israel, but not only Israel, also the United States, to put pressure on Israel and find a somewhat solution to this ongoing genocide.
Dr. Toomey, my last question is going to be for you. I want to ask you about your opinion on Mohammed bin Salman, the Saudi Crown Prince's statement. He said that a two-state solution is necessary, is needed, and then we'll join the Abraham Accords. How are you looking at his statements?
Actually, this is a very smart move from the Emir Crown Mohammed bin Salman. Actually, he knows well that President Donald Trump wants to trap him in this or corner him in this thorny issue about the Abraham Accord and bring him for this quote-unquote normalization with Israel, in which what the Israelis want, because to them it's not about peace. Again, it's about capitulation and to go and burn for good the Palestinian cause. But the Saudis now did understand that approach very well, and this is why they are, again, it's their demand. Okay, let's do it. I mean, let's the Israelis recognize the Palestinians, and we will welcome to recognize Israel. And this is not new. I mean, goes back to the Arab League initiative, Beirut initiative of 2002 in Beirut Summit. But the Israelis, they will never do that because, again, they don't believe in two-state solution, period.
Dr. Abdunur Toumi, thank you so much for that analysis and for being a part of Turkey's diplomacy today.
Thank you.
Dr. Mehmet Çelik, Daily Sabah's editorial coordinator, thank you so much for being with us in the studios.
Thank you, Mark.
That brings us to the end of our program. Thanks for joining us. Bye for now.